Okay, good afternoon. Thank you very much for coming back to this is the 5th week. And it's very nice that we have a holiday tomorrow. And I wish all of you a safe and happy public holiday tomorrow. And today we will wrap up our topic of Scrum. Let's see. Okay. So let's look at what we have studied last week. We studied the use of personas, which is a term to mean that we are making up an imaginary person. Okay, we give it a name, give him, her, even possibly a picture, hand-drawn or real person, cartoon, and also we describe the characteristics and behaviors of this person and the goal he has, so that when we designed our application, we can think of serving a very specific person. It helps us to become more concrete, okay? And also, if we are building an application, we want to care for the users. If we don't care about the users, the outcome won't be very good. And if we care for them, then maybe it's better to put a face or an actual, more solid, concrete description of that person. So that will help us to sympathize with that person. Okay, and the term we only use one or two slides to discuss pain point analysis. Pain point, it means some pain that users may experience for using the existing solution. That gives us the motivation to build a better solutions. So we haven't get a chance to get into pain point analysis. So the whole point of bringing up that term is to make you more aware of the importance of looking after the user. And if we want to build a new applications, our motivation should really be improving on a problem that the users are encountering with the old solution, old application. And in the lab, we have written some user stories, and hopefully your tutor will finish giving you feedback. I haven't started mine yet, but for my tutorial, you can be sure that I would give you written feedback to your submission, as well as face-to-face at the lab. So if you have any questions, if you want feedback from your tutors, make sure you talk to your group, talk to your tutor together in the lab about how to write better user stories and acceptance criteria. So basically, user stories are user tasks, something that users want to do, and the user, any application may have multiple kinds of users. For example, if we are running an e-commerce website, we can have customers, and we can have vendors who sell stuff through our platform, and we could have administrator to manage everything. So for just an e-commerce website, we can have 3 different roles. And so for each kind of role, we probably can think of multiple user stories for them. And for each user story, there should be a goal and at least one benefit. Okay, so this is what user stories would try to capture. But user stories are very brief. We only do it in one sentence. So it doesn't have enough information. So for each user story, we will write a number of acceptance criteria to list things perhaps point by point. We show there are two major ways to write acceptance criteria. Perhaps the most popular one is the rules. Okay, so we will encounter that more in future weeks in your lab activities. And also we can think of it as multiple scenarios can make up a user story. For example, think of maybe withdrawing money from an ATM. Okay, so if we think of withdrawing money from an ATM, we can think of several scenarios. One scenario is maybe I get the wrong password, so my password was unsuccessful. So that is a bad scenario. So one of them. The other one is, well, I withdraw money from the ATM successfully. So that's a good one. And still another maybe bad one is perhaps I try to withdraw more money than I have in my account. So we can easily think of three scenarios for the user story of withdrawing money from the banking machine, ATM. Okay, so that's scenarios. And what about multiple rule-based? Well, if you are trying to write, say, a search page for a library website, then you want to search some item, then what would be the rules? The rules is perhaps one is the capability to search by author name. Another is to search by title of the books. And also another rule is perhaps to order the return result by, or maybe to search by date. For example, I only want books that were published after year 2000. Okay, I don't want very old computer books. Maybe they are not useful. So those are two ways to write acceptance criteria. By rules, then rules work like checklists. So at the end, after you finish your work, you make sure all the rules passed. And similarly for scenarios, but scenarios is more for different outcome. As in the case of withdrawing from the banking machine, invalid card or valid card with wrong password, successful, and also unsuccessful for withdrawing too much money. So that are the different scenarios, different outcomes. So we talked about that last week. We also teach two types of backlogs. The word backlog means something that is outstanding, something that you need to do but you haven't done. That's backlog. For example, if in the office your boss asks you, want to give you new tasks to do, then maybe you can talk to you can beg your boss saying that I have a backlog with long list of things to do. So backlog means something that you should do and you want to do, but it's not done yet. So product backlog is you have one product backlog for the entire system you're trying to build. Okay, but sprint backlog, well, first, the sprint concept of sprint is a short period of time, maybe 2 weeks. Then a sprint backlog would contain the wish list from a selected user story from the product backlog that you want to accomplish within the current sprint or one sprint. That's what sprint backlog. We also look at the burn down chart that has a graph going generally downward. Occasionally it will go upward. It means you underestimate the effort. You adjust the effort. So the line, the point, the y-axis represent the remaining effort to complete the work for the current sprint. So we have a burn down chart for every sprint. So that was what we learned last week. And today we will discuss how we operate in Scrum. So we need to know two things. One is what kind of roles, responsibility we may have. Do we have different responsibilities in a Scrum team? If so, what are they? And also, there are different kinds of meetings we can have in Scrum. And we'll learn that we break down a product backlog item, which is usually a user story. We break it up, the user story. User story was written from user's perspective, but we can break it down into multiple programmers' tasks. So take, for example, if we want to write a screen, then maybe there's someone to design the screen layout, and maybe someone do the database stuff, and maybe someone do the JavaScript. So those I just mentioned, perhaps 3 different tasks just for one web page. So this is what we do here. And by doing that, each task becomes smaller, and we can do a job of estimation better. So we know when we put something, when we select something for the current sprint to do, then we can get a good estimate of how much time it will take, whether we should have it in the current sprint. Okay, we'll use some board, something like a corkboard or some whiteboard to help us keep track of the project progress, and we'll learn a few things that also help us manage Scrum projects. Okay, so we sort of discussed this a little bit, but in Scrum, we want to keep track of the project progress. Okay, we have 2 ways. Okay, so you try to put up your hand and say which way seems to be better. So the first way is how many % of the work has been completed. Okay, that's one way. The other way is how much time do you need in person hours, let's say, to finish it. But by the way, do you know what person hours means? The term person hours is person-hour. Okay, that means that's the effort of one person working for 1 hour. Sometimes we use bigger unit like person day. That means one person working on it for 1 day. So that is the effort. So who said we would measure progress by how many % is done? How many % is done? Okay, nobody. And who says we would measure progress by how many work effort, for example, person hours remaining to finish? How many think that we measure progress by the number of person hours left? Still no hands. Okay. The answer is we will not say that in Scrum we are 60% done with a user story, or we are 20% done with a task. Okay, we don't say that. Okay, we would say for a task how many person hours or how many person days, or later in this class we will say how many story points we need to complete a task. Okay, so we don't say how many percentage we have completed. Okay, because if you say you are 50% done, or you are 20% done, you're 60% done, your customers don't know how much time do you need. Okay, so from the benefit of users really care about when am I going to have the thing ready for me. So for them, it's best for you to tell them I still need 1 more day, or I still need 2 more days. Don't say that I've done it for 70%. Okay, or it's just like but think of it with your own situation. Suppose your homework is due today, your assignment is due today. You go to ask for extension from your professor. Okay, do you think your case would be clearer or better for the professor to decide by saying, I am 80% done with my assignment, or I still need 3 more hours for my assignment? Which one do you think would the professor like to hear? Somehow I lost my voice. Okay, which one, if you were the professor, do you want to hear the student tell you that I'm 80% done with my assignment? Okay, how about I just need 1 more day? No hands, so looks like none of you want to be a professor in the future, I guess. But maybe some of you will become a boss, right? When your subordinate come to you, you need to manage your staff. Okay, if as a leader you don't manage them, they're going to manage you. Okay, so don't let them manage you too much. Okay, so we have seen this last week, and this is to say a project starts with someone with a vision, and then we build a product backlog, and we go through 2 to 4 week sprints. But each sprint we would use a sprint backlog, and this sprint backlog is created by taking the good, the valuable PBIs or user stories from the product backlog. So we select them and we go through it, and at the end we fully tested something, and we will give potentially we will give the customers the finished software. Okay, so in other words, our product is ready to be released, like with an update. And every 24 hours, every day, okay, we would have a daily Scrum meeting. So that takes us to our next topic of different kinds of meetings. But let's remind ourselves with these terms. Okay, Scrum is the name of a very popular agile project management method. In fact, agile, there are many agile methods. There are, but the one that is most famous is Scrum, and sprints refer to a short duration, 1 week to 1 month, but few people use 1 week. So we say, well, 2 weeks would be the shortest practical. And then potentially shippable product means your work is fully tested, okay? Because we don't want to a half working product, a half tested working product is no use to the users. The whole idea of agile methods or Scrum is to put the users in the center of your attention. So users is what we care for. So we, if we just finish coding, if it's not tested, it's not very useful to the users. So we don't consider it work done. Okay. So in these here, can you see it in the back? Sprint planning meeting. This is daily Scrum meeting, and sprint review meeting, sprint retroactive meeting. Okay. Can you see it in the back? Yes? Okay, good. Okay. So we start with a product backlog, and then at the beginning we have a sprint planning meeting. And actually, in the bottom, in the small words, we also shows the 3 different roles we will talk next. Product owner, Scrum Master, and development team. But let's go back to the meeting first. So initially, every sprint we have a sprint planning meeting. We go to look at the product backlog and see how many wish lists is not done. So we look at it and we look at the priority, and we see which one has high priority from the user's perspective. And then we pick the one that we can finish in 1 sprint. And then we create a sprint backlog. And then after we start, we would have a daily Scrum meeting. Okay, we'll talk more about it. And then at the end we have a finished product. Okay, can be released to the user, and then we will have a review meeting and retrospective meeting. The review meeting will allow the users to look at, based on what we have given them, maybe he or she would update the priority of our product backlog after they have seen what we gave them. And in the sprint retrospective meeting, we look at the way we do things together, our processes, how people work together. Is there anything that needs to be improved? So we try to improve the process, the way people work together in a team in the retrospective meeting. But the review meeting, we try to look at the product. We focus on the product. So let's look at the meeting one by one. Okay, see these are the 4 meetings. Okay, the asterisks here, I'm borrowing a notation from regular expressions. Any one of you heard of regular expressions? 有冇聽過呢個 term 啊？ Regular expressions. Regular expressions is a term you will heard about it in discrete structure course. Okay, regular expressions. It is, but if we apply it to string processing, regular expressions allow us to process strings in a very powerful way. And in that notation, regular expression notation, we use asterisks to mean that this is something we will repeat. Okay, so that means the other three kinds of meeting happen once in every sprint, but the daily Scrum meeting would happen 10 times in a 2-week sprint size, and 20 times in a 4-week sprint size. Okay, so the asterisk stands for repetition. Okay, so in a sprint planning meeting, we will look at the product backlog, and we have user stories there. We would possibly update the priority, and we take the high priority product backlog items and define it with acceptance criteria. We then break down high priority PBI into developer task, and then we give estimates to the PBIs, the highly valued PBIs, based on the estimates for developer task. And then after we have the total, the subtotal of each PBI, then we know how many PBI can be fit into the next sprint. Okay. For example, let me give you some very simple arithmetic, okay, to do. If our sprint size is 2 weeks, and we have 5 team members in our Scrum team, 5 team members, 2 weeks. 2 weeks, we assume 10 working days. How many person days do we have in one sprint? How many person days? Okay, so maybe we have 10 working days. We have 10 working days in one sprint, right? 2 weeks. And we have 5 people on the team. So clearly we have 50 person days. Okay, and if we assume 8-hour working day, then we would have 400 person hours. So now, if you have, let's say, one PBI that requires 200 person hours. This is PBI 1, okay? And then PBI 2 is 100 person hours. PBI 3 is 100, let's say. PBI 4 is 300. Okay, so in this case, if you want to choose some of the PBI to do in your next sprint, you can choose PBI 1, 2, 3, or 2, 4, or 3, 4. So because they add up to 400 person hours, you cannot choose, let's say, 1, 4, because if you choose 1, 4, then at the end of the sprint, these 2 PBI is not done. Okay, so you want to so do we understand so far, right? So these person hours is after we have done the estimation. Okay, after we've done the estimation, after we look at this, we add up. For example, PBI 1 may contain 3 tasks. Let's say one task is task 1 is 50 person hour. Task 2 is and maybe just give it nice round number, okay? And then task 3 is 100 person hour. So if somehow this one doesn't, so if PBI can be broken down into 3 tasks with this number of person hours, we can add them up to figure out this one, and then we can select good ones. So how do we choose between 2 and 4 or 3 and 4? Well, if 2 is more valuable, then we choose 2 and 4. If 3 is more valuable, then we choose 3 and 4. Okay, so we compare. Okay, so this is what we do in a sprint planning meeting. Okay, so the whole idea of the sprint planning meeting is through this acceptance criteria, through this breaking down user story into tasks, we better understand the user requirements and the amount of work required. Okay, maybe we would even produce a high-level design diagram. Okay, we'll learn UML diagrams later. So that is the planning meeting at the beginning of a sprint. And then every day, if we look at, let's say, maybe we should look at, maybe I can help you look at last week. Last week, remember we have a sprint backlog example. So there's a user story, we break it up into tasks, and then we estimate the person hours. If we add them up, this will be at the bottom, we are not showing here, but at the bottom we'll have the total number of hours to be done in this sprint backlog. And then now we can relate back to the burn down chart. Initially, maybe we have close to 400 person hours of work to do at the beginning, but as each day progresses, we reduce it. And the straight line is the ideal case, and the blue line is the reality case. Sometimes if it's above the ideal line, that means we are progressing very slow, because at the end we plan to have all the works finished, so the remaining work should add up to 0 person hour. But then if it's 100, that means we are behind. And sometimes we were slow at the beginning, but then we catch up later, and because we work perhaps very hard or even come back on the weekend, so we get to 0, and this means everything is done. Okay, and this is what we see in the middle of the sprint. Okay, we are at day 6, maybe this is day 6. So at first we progress very fast, but somehow we slow down a little bit, and we estimate things wrong, so that as days go by, actually we find out there are more, the tasks are more difficult, so this gone up. Okay, so this is how can I come back to well, okay, since I can't get it out nicely without perhaps possibly stopping the recorder, and it's 40 minutes, so why don't we take a break right now? So we'll take a break right now.